I have so many people to thank tonight, and I really do consider myself to be what I would call an accidental fundraiser. Quite frankly, as a broadcaster, I didn't set out to become a leader with a highly focused and absolutely driven mission. That wasn't the plan. And yet, as it turned out, circumstances required nothing less of me. They demanded leadership, and I had to step up to the challenge because, to quote Robert Frost, and this is still true, I have a promise to keep. I have never seen myself as an athlete, but rather as an ordinary dad, and if there's one thing I've discovered, it's that you find out just how strong you are when being strong is the only choice there is. I certainly never dreamt that I would become part of a great team, and you are that great team that has helped us raise millions for medical research, nor that I would encounter and learn to navigate enormous difficulties over and over again. I felt I had no choice, and if I had to, I would do the same again. There was so much at stake. Looking back, I feel I have played a very small part in what we in this room have accomplished together. I was just fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to lead the parade a couple of times. It's really all of you who are here tonight who have made Jesse's journey into what it is today. You and people across Canada and in other countries who realize the value of investing in research. There are so many people to thank that I need to ask you to forgive me at this point because I am fearful that I am going to overlook someone, and that is never my intent. Please know that if I make that mistake, I have thanked you many, many times in my heart. Let me begin with the people who created the documentary you have just seen. Let's thank Alex Schmall from Brickhouse Productions, along with his Carol, Evan, Elliot, John, and the rest of the folks at Brickhouse. I say very well done to you. This is the first time I have seen this. Thank you all. And when it comes to things that I had not seen or expected, I want to thank my friend and our Member of Parliament for London West, Kate Young. Thank you for coordinating having the Prime Minister send that message, Kate. That's very, very deeply appreciated, and I must say a most pleasant surprise. As we turn back the clock tonight, let me first turn to the man who served as a mentor for me, the man who worked with and coined the phrase Marathon of Hope for Terry Fox. My friend Ron Calhoun, who believed in what might be possible if we tried hard. And Ron is here tonight. And Ron, I'd like you to stand up and take a bow, if you would please. My friend Ron Calhoun. Ron was one of a small group of people who sat around a table on a cold winter night in December of 1994, along with Shereen's brother Glenn and the late Mike Woodward, when Jesse's journey was born. I thank those who served on our very first board of directors and those who serve on our board of directors today for their dedication to volunteerism, which has been the hallmark of Jesse's journey from its beginning. Thank you to all those volunteers, many of whom are gone now, for being on the road with Jesse and I, or working behind the scenes in London to assure our success in our first adventure together across Ontario. On this 20th anniversary of the start of the walk across Canada, I'd like to thank Maureen Spencer-Golovchenko, who quarterbacked that home team that organized rooms and meals and donations and so many, many other things. And please keep in mind that, believe it or not, when we went across Canada, we did not have a website, as so many people did not in those days. So to raise that much money with no vehicle for people to give was rather amazing. I want to thank all those volunteers who helped out all across the country in 1998 and who flew at their own expense to far, far distant places to be a part of something very special. I want to mention the people who made up the permanent road crew who kept our little caravan of determined people moving forward day after day. These are the people I was closest to each and every day. Trish Federico, a kinesiology student at Western, was our road manager who kept Jesse's journey on track both in 1995 and 1998 as I crossed Canada. And although he wasn't with us in 1998, I want to mention Dr. Sean Bagshaw, another kinesiology student, now a doctor in Edmonton, who has done amazing things in the field of research. He was Jesse's helper. His job basically was to be with Jesse overnight and to see that Jesse's needs were met during the time we were on the road, because I could not push that wheelchair and then look after Jesse overnight. Sean somehow did that. He looked after Jesse overnight, and he was always there on the road with us. How he managed that, I have no idea. I think it has something to do with being young. Ted Edinger also served as road manager in 1998 and stepped up to the plate with whatever else had to be done, as well as keeping me company on the road. And he walked for more than 700 kilometers with me. And it was fun to step onto the motorhome for one of our tea or fruit breaks, and there Ted would be as people came and went all the time, and he would just casually look up and say, "Hi, it's me again." Bevan Palmatier was our media coordinator, who worked a couple of days ahead of us on the road, setting up radio interviews and television interviews and newspaper interviews. And he sometimes came back to us after a few days, and I often wondered if he came back just to see if we were still there. The late Mike Woodward served double duty. Mike, along with John McHale, was a motorhome driver for us across Ontario and also drove the motorhome in 1998, as well as serving as the board secretary. And as board secretary, he was rather amazing. Mike was a master wordsmith who provided the minutes of meetings the very next morning with every T crossed, every I dotted, and every comma, period, exclamation mark, and question mark exactly where it should be amidst his well-crafted grammar. Ed Coxworthy from Bell Island, Newfoundland, was our second motorhome driver going across Canada. And when I mentioned grammar, Ed's was a slightly different story. Every sentence the man spoke seemed to begin with the words, "By the Jesus." He would go to shop for groceries, because when you live on a motorhome, you have to do the things you do in everyday life. You have to prepare meals and do the dishes and make your bed and all those sorts of things. Ed came back from getting groceries and he said to me, "By the Jesus, Johnny, the meat in that deli, they sliced it so thin it only had one side." These were things he said day in and day out. Mario Chioini, a bilingual teacher from London who now teaches school in Paris, France, guided us through Quebec in 1998 as we struggled with our high school French, trying to read everything from road signs to food menus for 21 days. There were hundreds of people who shuffled in and out of my life in the 286 days I spent on the road some 20 years ago. They usually arrived on Saturday, and they had eyes the size of saucers as they began to wonder, what have I gotten myself into? They received about a 15-minute crash course on cutting fruit, making tea, doing laundry, making peanut butter and jam sandwiches, gassing up vehicles, charging walkie-talkies, and everything else that had to be done, and it had to become second nature to them over the course of the next week, and they did that in record time. On Sunday mornings, when people left, there were a lot of tears as people who had arrived as rookies a week earlier didn't want to leave, but others were waiting their turn. There was media help across Canada, and particularly from home. I enjoyed speaking with my friends every morning, Peter Garland, Steve Garrison, Rich Greven, and Jim Swan among them. On the road, I was joined by my friends from both television and newspaper as we spent hours talking about our childhoods, spent collecting baseball cards, and the snowman at the far end of the room knows this conversation. We talked about how we tormented people with pea shooters as children. saving our beehive corn syrup labels to mail in for black and white pictures of Jean Beliveau and Jacques Plante from beehive corn syrup. And it seems that we knew the batting averages and statistics of every player in Major League Baseball, but we could not get past grade 5 math for some reason. We knew whose windows to soap on Halloween and which gardens had the best cherry and apple trees and raspberries and carrots that could be acquired after dark. There were media friends across the country who helped spread the word, and I thank them all very much for doing that. There were hundreds of service clubs, Lions clubs, the Lioness clubs, along with Kiwanians, Rotarians, and many others who opened their homes to our little band of strangers from Ontario. They provided meals, and in British Columbia at Christmas time, they decorated our motel rooms and saw that there was a turkey in the oven for Christmas Day, and I know that sometimes we can't remember what we bought for people last Christmas. We can't remember what people gave us last Christmas. But Christmas in Sicamous, British Columbia, 1998, is a vivid memory in my mind. I can still see those uneven arborite tables that we jammed together, an assortment of chairs, a mixture of mismatched cups, glasses, and silverware, along with a couple of red candles that have painted a lovely picture for me of that Christmas that was the most memorable and one that gave me perhaps the truest meaning of Christmas. I thank the thousands who came out to the roadside, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, grandchildren, people who came with their cats and dogs, and I remember stopping to take pictures so often where we took the camera from Dad so he could be in the picture, because we all have all those albums, but Dad's not in them very often because he was holding the camera. We made sure that Dad was always in that picture. It was a great experience, and I thank all those kids who came to the roadside from schools by the hundreds, who brought everything from posters of support to flags and checks and jars full of coins that they had collected for Jesse's journey. I especially thank all adults and children who came to the roadside in wheelchairs. I did my best to try and stop and speak to each and every one of those people. I thank all the hockey players in little towns like Swift Current, Saskatchewan, Medicine Hat, Alberta, towns that are just like Humboldt, Saskatchewan. It was in these towns that hockey teams asked us to take part in an opening face-off and presented us with a team sweater, and they held those 50-50 draws for Jesse's journey. These are the little places where young players are the heart of that community, and they instill pride in that community. They show us Canadian values and how to be the best at what you are doing. Be the best at what you are doing as often as you can, and at the same time, always do everything you can to help others. I thank all the police officers, municipal forces, provincial police, RCMP officers who logged hundreds of kilometers following behind me at 5 kilometers per hour across the Trans-Canada Highway. When they had to attend court, I thank those who took over driving one of the escort vans behind me in what had to be one of the most boring jobs you can imagine. I particularly thank all of them for not running me over. I thank all those firefighters who escorted us through small-town Canada, firing off those sirens and helping collect money along the road. There were lots and lots of one-off single moments that stick in my mind. There was the day we stopped on the side of the road in Newfoundland, and up ahead there was a sign that said Moose Crossing. And my friend Mike Woodward looked at us and said, "I didn't know they could read." It was a Mike joke. It was a small club of people who wanted to spend an entire day on the road with me and experience what walking 33 kilometers a day is like. Only one of them was a woman, and Ann Hutchison is here tonight. And I thank you, Ann, for the great conversation and giving me a jolt of inspiration on that day in Quebec when it rained all day and very few people stopped to make a donation. Ann's husband, Peter, who was with me on day one in Newfoundland, conducted an auction live on air in London while he was taking those bids on items while hosting his show from a motorhome in the middle of Saskatchewan. This was a bit of logistics for 1998. I thank the two little girls in British Columbia who decided to go out and shovel snow. They did this for a week before I got to Port Coquitlam, and I was delighted to receive 42 of the hardest earned dollars we ever received on that journey. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what real philanthropy is all about. People who reach into their own pocket to help others. I thank all of those small armies of men and women who were the volunteers in those church basements preparing food and making a group of weary travelers from Ontario feel at home. We never ate so much food that was prepared with so much loving care. I think I might be somewhat responsible for 3 marriages. Ted Edinger and Diane, a beautiful strawberry blonde, a volunteer who traveled through the mountains of British Columbia in the dark of night with an RCMP officer to be with us at Christmas so that another volunteer could go home for Christmas. Major Phil Spencer, who marched through Northern Ontario with me, and I mean marched, married the captain of our home team, Maureen Golovchenko, and Bevan Palmatier, our media guy who spent so much time up ahead of us doing that media work, all alone, isn't alone anymore. He married Renata, who is here tonight, who was also on the road with us as a volunteer, and they now have 3 lovely boys. And I'm happy to report that all 3 marriages have worked out pretty great. I'm thinking, yes. I'm thinking that marriage counselor might be my next career. I thank those people who stopped by the motorhome with butter tarts for us when people found out that I have a liking for butter tarts. I apologized to the road team for those times when they opened the fridge door looking for a cold glass of milk and all they found was a wall of butter tarts as they were being donated faster than we could eat them. I thank all of you in the room tonight who have donned a t-shirt, a Jesse's Journey hat, and taken part in things like our annual walk, the Plunkett Car Show, Trivia Night, skating carnivals, and all those special events that could not take place without you. And a special thanks to Ken Chaplin and his team who have looked after 50-50 ticket sales at hundreds and hundreds of classic car cruise nights, not only in London but across southwestern Ontario. I thank Rick Moss for becoming our managing director at a time when we needed that kind of leadership. Rick thanked me for asking him to come on board some 15 years ago, I believe. And he said to me that he had never worked for a not-for-profit before. He said that he had worked for a lot of places that never made a profit, but never intentionally. I thank Wendy Sanderson-Cully for accepting the torch that Rick passed. Wendy is doing an outstanding job with her team, Megan Zinn in Media Relations, Solveig Janitis in Special Events, who organized tonight for us, along with all the office staff, Shauna Roberts in Data Processing, and Darlene Sanderson, who looks after everything else that needs to be done in our small shop. I thank those families across the country who put together events to help Jesse's Journey. Special thanks to the Borden family and the Lindsay family for Eric's amazing race, and to Brian and George for the Rice Lake Swim, which has grown every year, the Provenzano family from Windsor, for Tori's Tourney, for Jesse's Journey. I thank Andrew Sidmaratsky and his family for Max's Big Ride. And I thank the Brock Janes family for the golf tournament that they operate. I thank Mike and Laura McCullough for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders golf tournament, the organizers of Isaac's Trek for Treats in Acton, and to the Capelli families in Montreal for their enormous generosity in seeing that we received the proceeds of McHappy Day from their venues. I especially want to recognize my friend Bob Facka. Bob, stand up for a second, will you please? Bob took on a great challenge as a Duchenne grandpa. He had 2 walks for his grandson Louis, the first a journey of 500 kilometers through Ontario, and then to top that, Bob walked from Quebec City to Winnipeg, raising in total more than $1 million for Jesse's journey and for research. And thank you to all the other families, too numerous to mention, for all the work they do in keeping Jesse's Journey Canada's leading fundraising group and Canada's leading funder in research in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Whether it was at special events on the road or wherever, I was always concerned about the weather and how it was going to affect those volunteers who were with us for a week and who never complained about the blisters which they saw as badges of honor. I worried about every day their safety. And when I look back on those 10 months on the road, I remember thinking about how we would be in the Rogers Pass in December and how much snow we would be facing, particularly in avalanche zones. And when we got there was no snow. It was like we traveled across the country in a bubble. And Kevin, if you're here, this is aimed at you, my friend. It was like we traveled across the country in a bubble, literally. We were looked after by people. We were looked after by the weather. And it was just amazing how someone bigger than all of us just seemed to be watching over us and have been ever since. People often ask me if there is a particular story that sticks in my mind about our time together on the road, and there is. Jesse and I were near Kingston, and we were pushing on toward Ottawa. It was an early fall day. We were hot, we were tired, we probably stunk a bit, and people were pulling over and making donations behind us, and the volunteers were there collecting money. And this lady and her sister, who I met 3 years later, told me that she was there that day. They were driving a big black car going to Toronto. And she said to her sister, "Hey, that's Jesse's Journey. That's John and Jesse. We're going to pull over and make a donation." She turned that car around and got in line. And she said to her sister, "Susie, push the thing, make the window go down." And her sister looked at her and said, "The window hasn't gone down for years. It's not going down today." She said, No, I'll work the master thing and you push those switches and we'll make it go down." And they're getting closer to us and closer to us. They're still pushing all these buttons. Nothing. They got right up beside us, and guess what? They made a donation, and then they drove straight to the garage where this lady's husband worked. His name is Gary, and she got out of the car, and she said, "Honey, the window went down." And he said, "Susie, the window couldn't go down." And here's a great guy line, "I'll fix it on the weekend, I promise you." And the sister said, "No, Gary, the window went down." He said it couldn't go down. He took a screwdriver and he took the panel off that door and he showed the girls the wires didn't meet. Now, I met that lady 3 years later when Jesse and I were at an event at the Hilton in downtown London. She said, "Oh, please stay here till I go up and get my daughter." She went and got her daughter, who has cystic fibrosis, and as the kids were talking, she told me that story. And I knew this woman had no capacity to lie to me whatsoever. And when I put my head on the pillow at night, I do ask myself, what made that window go down? When I say that to audiences, I don't want to intrude on their beliefs, and I just say that maybe it's just part of the magic of Jesse's journey. But I'll leave it to that for you to decide. I thank all those people who saw a story on television, read a story in the newspaper, heard a story on radio, and then sat down and wrote a check that has helped us build the Jesse Davidson Endowment to where it now grants more than $1 million a year to those researchers. I thank for all the hours that you spend in your labs in Canada, in the United States, and in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, who know that Jesse's Journey will be there to support you on the road to a cure. I thank our friends at Moore in Toronto, who are the stewards and guardians of the dollars that Canadians have given us over the years from coast to coast and people from around the world. And you are charged with making sure that those dollars work as hard, or at least as hard, as the people who gave us those dollars had to work to gain them in the first place. I thank Jesse's brothers, Tyler and Tim, who lived in the shadow of the light that fell on Jesse in the time that we were building a new charity that was focused on fighting a disease through research, so that someday families like ours would never have to buy a wheelchair. I thank Jesse's mom, my wife Shireen, my pal, my friend, and really my rock, for doing all that had to be done, for seeing that the grass got cut, the groceries got bought, the house got painted, the bills got paid, and the boys got to all their events. And she looked after 3 boys, one with a disability, and still found time to walk the dog. You have always been there, and you will never know how much I appreciate that. I thank Jesse for showing us each and every day of his life what real courage is all about. Finding himself in a spotlight he never asked for, he responded magnificently with courage and determination. He is my inspiration, and I know he would be very proud of every one of you in this room tonight. Jesse would be the first to tell you that a disease may be called rare, but hope never should be. I promised Jesse that I would do all I could to find a cure. I still have a promise to keep and miles to go before I sleep. I thank you all, each and every one of you in this room tonight, from the bottom of my heart, for being a part of that promise. Thank you all very, very much.